Hello everybody, my name is Brian Stack. I'm a student at New England College, and today I'm going to be presenting on my action research project. The topic is supporting new teachers in an established competency-based learning system. My research question that I decided to focus on was specifically, how can I best support teachers who are new in their last 3 years to my school in their understanding of how to be effective in our school's competency-based learning system? This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, as my school has experienced some very high turnover recently, and actually for several years. So I'm always looking for ways that we can get a little better, getting our people up to speed so that they can be successful. Just so we're all on the same page, when we talk about action research, this goes back to Sager's work from 2000, collaborative action research for professional learning communities and guiding school improvement with action research. So action research is a process where you select a focus, clarify theories, identify research questions, collect and analyze data, report the results, and then take informed actions. So of course, you're a part today of the reporting of results stage. Just to be clear about the school that was part of this study, it's a suburban high school in southern New Hampshire. It serves about 700 students in grades 9 through 12. The population of the towns that comprise this school is just under 16,000 people. The average median household income in that year was about $87,000. More than 95% of the population in those towns is reported to be white, and 13% in the school qualify for free and reduced lunch. As far as the participants in the study, those would be the educators and specialists at the school. There are 60 of them. 36 are considered to be on continuing contract or tenured. And then you have 6 with 4 years experience, 7 who have 3 years, 7 who have just 2 years, and 4 who are in their first year. All the teachers in the school are assigned to a professional learning community, one of 7, and each team is facilitated by a team leader who is also a member of the Educator ranks. This chart here talks specifically for this school about what turnover rate has looked like over time. And you're actually looking at a 7-year history where turnover has been as high as 20% and as low as 7%, but it's about an average of 15% or so turnover, which is fairly high for if you look at the schools in the area of this school. Now we can translate that turnover into dollars. Based on the 2017 Learning Policy Institute report, it estimates that schools spend about $11,000 on every new teacher hired to bring them up to speed so they can be effective. So if you take the number of teachers that this school has turned over, multiplied by that 11,000, you're looking at spending well over $100,000 most years in associated costs just to bring them up to speed. And it's kind of hard to try to figure out where these costs come from because they're not direct costs. A lot of them are indirect costs. So competency education by definition, so we look to the Aurora Institute for that. Sturgis, Pittenger, and Patrick in 2011 broke competency ed out into 5 parts. So teachers in a competency ed model have to understand each of these parts and how they fit together in a CBE school. And I'll use CBE to define competency-based education. But there's an element where students advance upon demonstrated mastery, that they move when ready. There's an element that talks about how competencies are written as explicit, measurable, transferable learning outcomes that empower kids. There's a principle that talks about having meaningful assessment. There's a principle that talks about timely differentiated support based on individual learning needs. And then there's a part that talks about learning outcomes that measure the academics as well as the dispositions and skills, which in many states they call 21st century learning skills, work study practices, etc. So these are all elements that a teacher who's going to work in a competency-based school must be effective at. We can actually break each one of these design principles down. So when we talk about students moving when ready, There's an element that talks about having policy language in place to support that teachers can monitor pace and progress of students as they're working through their learning, and also that students are producing sufficient evidence in order to be deemed proficient. For that second design principle that focuses on competencies, the work really focuses around having the right framework of standards, learning progressions, and competencies that are aligned at the local, state, and national level. There's an element that talks about rigor and what that looks like and how you approach rigor. Then there's a piece that talks about calibration and recognizing that you need to have educators calibrating competencies across the grade levels and content areas to ensure a common understanding of proficiency. When we go to the fourth design principle, talks about having differentiated support and a monitoring of pace and progress. These are two important things that you want to have. And then design principle 5, when we talk about trying to measure both academic skills as well as dispositions, you want educators to be thinking about having application skills, that there have to be varied and multiple opportunities for students to be assessed in these. You want to have separation. You want to separate your academics from your dispositions when you report grades. And you want to have opportunities. You want to have lots of different ways, both in the classroom and out of the classroom, that students can demonstrate their mastery of these skills. Those are really important. And then design principle 3, I kind of saved this one for last out of order because I really want to drive home. This is probably the most critical one, especially for a new teacher, as the research shows. The performance assessment piece, teachers need to have an understanding of what a quality performance assessment looks like and allow teachers to develop skills or concepts in a variety of ways. Teachers need to be adept at grading and reporting in a competency-based model. They also need to calibrate their instruction in grading and assessment, again, so that they can develop some common understanding of proficiency. So this is just a little bit of a lay of the landscape to help people understand what is needed from educators to be successful in a CBE model. The other thing that teachers need is a solid, and at this school in particular, is a solid understanding of the professional learning community model. Now, in a professional learning community, teachers work in collaborative teams on 4 essential questions that really drive the work of the PLC. And the questions are, what is it do we want students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? What will we do if they didn't learn it? And what will we do if they already know it? So again, in an effective CBE school, and in this school that was being studied in particular, it is absolutely critical that teachers are able to work in a collaborative team in this model on these questions. So I have a number of materials here, and I'll share this slide deck with you, and you can click on these different things. But these are the research materials and procedures that I used for my action research project. So you can click on these, but the consent forms here for both the superintendent as well as the participants. I did a PLC self-assessment, so that what happened here is the teachers worked with their PLC team to complete a self-assessment for me. So there were about 8 teams in this particular school. There were educator surveys on the understanding of CBE, and you can click on that to read the survey, and teachers filled this out individually. We also did some focus group meetings with specific groups of teachers with different experience levels. And then, of course, I did data analysis, and I came up with a summary of findings and sharing my results. And everything was data collection, very focused on making sure we had generalizability, validity, reliability, and triangulation, as Sager suggests in his book. This chart just shows you how many of the staff members in this school were part of each collection tool. So you can see starting at the top for that self-assessment for PLCs, we had 56 out of 60 educators. The educator survey had 39 out of 60. And then the focus groups had 5 out of 14 and 14 out of 42. So that just shows you what percentage of the staff members responded to the tools. So this chart right here shows you each of the PLCs in this school and how they rated themselves on that tool for self-assessment. And it's color-coded from beginning, emerging, developing, and accomplished is in blue. So it's interesting to see some patterns here that every team clearly has found some areas where they believe that they're at the developing or accomplished level, and just about every team has also identified something that they're working on, which is normal. It's what you would expect to see. With the Educator survey, we have similar data here. We're showing color-coded the number of respondents that responded in these particular categories, whether it was strongly agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. So as you look at these questions, you can see the color coding will kind of tell you what the predominant answer was. So for example, the second one, in this school, the pace and progress of each student is monitored as they're challenged at their appropriate level, with a very high response rate for the agree and strongly disagree category. 36 out of 39 actually responded that way. So these questions actually mirror the design principles for CBE, and if you scroll through, I'll show you the second one here. You get to see, again, some trends where we have high response rates for strongly agree and agree in most categories. Same thing for design principle 3, again, high response rates for the strongly agree and agree categories, not necessarily as high, like the last question at the bottom here, calibration of instruction, grading, and assessment. You had 9 out of the 39 teachers who had some disagreement of that for one reason or another. This is design principle 4 and the data that came from design principle 4. And then this is the data for design principle 5. Again, for design principle 5, very high response rates for strongly agree or agree. So from this data, I kind of pulled it and took some common, I call them emerging themes that came out of the data. So very, very strong support for PLC model as a structure for common planning time that people believe is important. Educators feeling like administrator support and the FLT model are really important parts for teachers to help them understand and be more effective in a CBE model. For the second question, if you had a magic wand and could offer a piece of advice, what else would you want to see? Well, educators are looking for more professional development, more time to collaborate with their PLC, and a stronger mentoring program. So these were all things that came out in that open response question. And this is just more, some of the single answers are located here for that second question. This is our focus group data summary. So these are the things that came out from the 2 different focus groups. They had the same questions. So I just started to bullet some of the answers that you see. And you see a lot of the same things that we've already talked about with the importance of having that PLC time, leadership, PLCs, professional development. These are all things that came out in that focus group. So then that kind of takes me to, having put all this together, this would be my recommendation in the summary of my findings for my research. New educators would benefit from increased PLC time with other educators who teach the same subject and course. This would allow new teachers to increase their effectiveness with curriculum, instruction assessment, and grading reporting in the school's CBL model. The second one is that the mentoring program at this school should be expanded. So right now it only includes first-year new hires, but there's data to suggest that if you include second and third-year hires, it would be more accessible and more effective as a program as far as supporting folks with CBL. The last one is the school should look to increase professional development opportunities for new educators throughout the year and over their first few years of employment. And specifically, some training on competencies, proficiency, instruction, grading, and assessment would be really helpful. These slides here kind of talk to you about all the different resources that I used when I did my research. And those are all in my plan as well. And Thank you for being a part of my presentation today.